At an airport in India, a security officer allowed me to bring a bottle of water on the plane if I drank some of it in front of him. What instances of practical intelligence have you encountered? While getting on the bus to my job at Wendy's, I realized I didn't have exact change, only a $5. I reluctantly put the $5 in the box thing, as asking for change or pleading with the driver is a waste of time and just annoys the driver and passengers. The next day when I got on the bus, I went to put my dollars in the box and the driver put his hand over the slot. He looked at me and said, "You put a $5 in yesterday. You're good for the next 2 days. TLDR. Bus drivers are people too." Whoa, I don't know where you are from, but around here the bus gives you a change. Right now I'm living in South Korea and teaching English. I don't like a lot of things about Korea, but one thing I love is the button system at restaurants. At most restaurants there is a button buzzer at the table that you press when you need something from the waiter. Otherwise the waiter never bugs you. It is so nice and makes so much sense. One of my favorite restaurants has a touchscreen on the table. You just order as you go along through the touchscreen and only ever see waitstaff when they're bringing you your food. There is also a button to call someone over if you need them, but oh lord, I love that system. This is a bit of a long one, but it really happened. I used to be a horse and carriage driver in New York City years ago. One night my horse just decided to go home. Without me. It was early evening on a Saturday night. Manhattan was packed with people and tourists. My horse's route home took him down 7th Avenue and through Times Square. And he was a horse, so red lights didn't mean crap to him. He would definitely have caused serious injury and damage if he hadn't been stopped. Luckily for me, 2 NYC cops saw him pass by them without a driver and realized this could mean serious trouble. After initially trying to drive up next to him and grab his bridle, they realized the best course of action was to drive ahead of him and break any lights using their sirens and cop van. It was a van. And then they slowly cut him off and one of them jumped out and held him. When I finally arrived on the scene, I couldn't freaking believe it. 2 New York guys who very likely had zero interactions with horses in their lives used their heads on the spot to very possibly save lives. And my career as a horse and carriage driver. The best part was they regarded as a fun thing. They were amped about this. No charges, no tickets. Best cops in the world, man. They were young too. In a Japanese airport, they had a little machine specifically for water bottles. You put it in this sort of cuff holder thing. 2 seconds later some lights flash telling you what liquid is inside it. It was pretty cool. At Yankee Stadium, they made me chug my whole water bottle before bringing it in to make sure I wasn't sneaking alcohol in. If it was vodka, there would have been a 10-minute window between sober and belligerent drunkenness. Better make that 10 minutes count. Little did the Indian security officer know, you had spent the last 5 years slowly building up a resistance to liquid explosives. Or you were just willing to drink a bit of toxic liquid since you were planning on blowing up the plane you're going to be riding on in the next hour or two anyway. At Johannesburg Airport, the security screeners found a small pocket knife in my backpack. They said it was harmless and I could keep it. Have to be careful with prawn sympathizers. I work in IT. A co-worker came up to me and said my computer is running slow. Can you come take a look at it? Before I could utter a word, they said I have already restarted it. Practical intelligence. I love that SAR agents who take my driver's license, look at the name on it and ask, are you calcium bicarbonate? I can't imagine that any terrorist would get caught by those great investigation skills of that SAR. I heard a girl begging for cigarettes, and I mean begging, like she was almost in tears, saying she needed the nicotine. So some guy offered her some chew. She said no in a really disgusted manner, to which he replied, well, if you ain't willing to have chew, you don't need the nicotine that bad. A friend of mine at a restaurant asked for a side of sliced orange. The server explained that they do not have any oranges at that restaurant. Then your orange juice isn't freshly squeezed, is it? Double quote. The oranges were squeezed when they were fresh, sir. The juice was then packaged and sent to our restaurant. Before I was born, my mother had a case of her practical intelligence not being accepted. She grew up in Japan and had accordingly never learned to drive a car. Subway. She was taking her driver's test in the US, and while in a parking lot with the driving tester, she pulled around a car that was actively pulling into a stall. The tester said that was a very unsafe action and marked something on the test. My mother got pissed off and argued her case that a car that was pulling into the stall was not going to suddenly reverse and hit them. She thought that was a legitimate argument. Things got more heated, and after the test she stormed out. My dad said she essentially refused to talk about the test and was really pissy about the whole thing. She didn't want to practice anymore and declared driving wasn't for her. It wasn't until 6 months later that he was cleaning out his office and found a DMV envelope. She had passed the test and never even realized it, being too pissed to look at the form. My mother, ladies and gentlemen. When I flew domestically in the US about 9 months after 9/11, I encountered the same thing. I could bring my own water on as long as I drank from it. People forget that Tsar really didn't get ridiculous until a couple of years after 9/11. The Tsar didn't exist until 2002. Before the inception of the Tsar, airports hired private security companies and set up individual security measures. Also until mid-2003 the Tsar was part of the Department of Transportation and not Homeland Security. I think it was that switch that caused them to go crazy. When going through security at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, my mother was asked to prove her non-digital camera was not a concealed weapon by allowing the security guard to take a photo of my family and I. Well, okay, but make sure you turn the safety off and you take a picture of my ugly son first. I must have picked this up from observing someone else. I was attending my son's 2nd grade class orientation, a program for some selected students, a few days ago. The class had kids from different 2-grade classrooms. The teacher had 2 copies of the class student list on a table. She said the copy machine had broken down and those were her only copies. Everyone started writing down the names of the students on the list. I took my phone out and snapped a picture of the list. Everyone stopped writing. Some said aha, whipped out their phones and did the same. Literally a photocopy. I once had to stage a plane hijacking using my nail clippers to prove that I was incapable of hijacking with them. Good times. Then you're stuck between trying to reenact a badass nail clipper hijacking and actually getting on your flight. About 5 years ago we were flying out of Austin, TX after a convention. It was 6 AM and I was still half asleep. We loaded all of our stuff on the conveyor, laptops, carry-ons, shoes, and in my haste I forgot my Zippo in the watch pocket of my Levi's. It was an old and beat up Zippo, but it was given to me by my grandpa many moons ago. I stepped through the metal detector, and as it went off I immediately knew what I had forgotten. I reached to remove it from my pocket. The small Mexican security agent at my left yelled no and my hands shot up above my head like I had just been held up by an armed gunman. He walked around to face me, looking up at me quite sternly, when he said, "Which pocket?" "Watch pocket, sir." "Hands straight out," to which I complied. He fished it out and inspected it. He then held it about 3 inches from my face and opened it. He said, "If this doesn't light, we are going to have a big problem, kiddo." He put his thumb on the wheel and gave it a flick. First time, every time, a nice little flame came to life. He flicked it closed, handed it back to me and said, "Next time, bring a freaking big, son." I got into the Holocaust Museum in Washington DC with a bottle of water the same way, had to have a sip in front of the security guard. I figured that was just a normal security guard practice. My son and I had to go to the courthouse and picked up chocolate milk and coffee before going. He was confused. He was 2 at the time, why I insisted he drink some in front of the nice lady with a shiny badge. I accidentally packed a vegetable peeler in my carry-on. The security guy took it out and rubbed it against his thumb to determine whether or not it was sharp. After realizing it was dull as frick, he gave it back to me and told me how to sharpen it. This happened in Canada. I've taught freshmen writing, that dreaded, boring, GPA ruining course, for the past few years. I usually end up writing a large amount of notes on the board that students should be taking notes on, but usually don't. I let it slide because I want them engaged in conversation. Then a few semesters ago I realized that all the students had camera phones. Whenever we have a lot of notes, I tell them to engage in the discussion and take a picture of the notes at the end of class. Everyone wins. Some time ago, this dude told me he had a job offer, and he gave me his card. I went to this one place and got in. It was kind of weird, though. There was about 10 of us in a big room with a coffee table of sorts in the middle. Anyhow, I took a seat in one of these egg-shaped seats they had. They gave us this test to fill out and a pencil. It was uncomfortable as heck. I tell ya, all of these guys were trying to write on their tests while holding it in their hands. Some tried to use the back of the chair. Took me no longer than a couple seconds to realize I could just grab the table and drag it closer to my chair, and so I did. You should have seen the faces on the other guys. I even asked them if someone else would like to use the table, but they said nothing. That's some practical intelligence for y'all. Shortly after getting out of the hospital from a car crash, I was home alone and needed to open a new jar of salsa. My arm had sustained nerve damage in the crash and was pretty weak, so I couldn't just twist the lid off. After a few minutes, I just grabbed the can opener and used the hook part to pry under the lid until the seal broke. Works like a charm on any kind of jar, including pickles. My country realized that even if they do nothing about terrorism, there are about a million things that are more likely to kill someone than an airplane being hijacked and destroyed. And so they got rid of airport security altogether and spent the money that was saved on medical research that saved more lives than aviation security ever did. Then I woke up. For a minute I thought you were Madagascar. 10 years back I was flying to Dubai. After a quick goodbye smoke with friends I pocketed my Zippo and headed to security check. The guy found the Zippo. It was a limited edition beauty, and instead of throwing it he told me to pick it up from the airline counter in Dubai. Of course, I thought he was bluffing and had pocketed it for himself. After picking up my luggage at Dubai, on a whim and a tenuous faith in human nature, I walked up to the airline counter and explained why I was there. The lady got up, came back with a little bag and fished through it till she found my lighter, good as gold, nestled it amongst the contents. This kept me smiling for the entire drive to my hotel. A female security officer let a friend of mine bring her bottle of something for cleaning her vagina. On the plane, security officer said that since she needed to bring it on the plane in her hand luggage, she really must need it. I was a ride operator a few years ago. We had to check if people were 18 if they wanted to accompany a small kid on a ride. The easiest thing to ask was, what year were you born? Kids suck at maths on the spot. My wife was in line at a TSA checkpoint waiting for her flight just after the no liquid rule had been put into place. The guy in front of her had a big bottle of Johnny Walker Blue, nice expensive whiskey. The TSA agent had been unabashedly eyeing it the whole time the man was in line. When he came up, the TSA agent told him to put it in the bin, reciting the new no liquid rule. The man refused. The agent insisted. The man asked what would happen to it. The agent told him with a crap-eating grin that usually things get thrown out, but he'd probably be taking that home. The man said, keep the flight, I'm taking the train, and walked out with his bottle. Last time my brother stayed at my house, he was blown away that I sorted the silverware when putting it into the dishwasher instead of when taking it out. 2 sections for forks, 1 section for spoons, 1 section for knives, 1 section for serving utensils and 1 section for preparation utensils. I can put away the silverware in about 10 seconds, across 3 different drawers, and it takes minimal time when loading. I didn't realize that not everyone does this. I doubt this will get seen, but here it is. I was flying back home for R&R from Afghanistan a few years ago. We went through customs in Afghanistan, again in Kuwait, and for a 3rd time in Atlanta. My carry-on has a change in uniform and other hygiene items in it, and the X-ray scanner tells his co-worker to search the bag. I sigh. So they open it up, and in the cargo pocket of my other uniform pants is a live 7.62mm round. Being in uniform and admitting my reason for travel, the searcher goes and talks to his supervisor, comes back in about 30 seconds, and says, you can't do much harm with just 1 round, so we'll just let you go, but the ammo stays with us. Got pulled over for speeding. Cop asks why I was speeding. I said I had to pee bad. He allowed me to pee on the side of the road and let me off with a warning. I'm not sure how practical this is. If the person had bomb making material, do you think they would be concerned with the impact on his or her health? For all the comments about that SAR sucking, you're missing the point. That SAR was created so as to indemnify the airlines of any responsibility for terrorist attacks. It was a big freebie, and then the security companies got involved and started spending millions of dollars lobbying to have body scanners installed. Freaking Israel doesn't use these things. Think they might have a terrorist problem to worry about? Italy, Germany, Australia, they don't use them. Last time I flew, the scanner wasn't working, so they just had people go through the metal detector. When's the last time they just waved you through if the metal detector wasn't working? Everyone already knows these $1 million systems are a joke. You can point out how useless and stupid they are all you want, but you may as well stand in front of the IRS building and whine that taxes are unfair. Common sense doesn't factor into the equation. It's the money that makes the decisions. My dad was not allowed on a plane with his violin because of the strings. He showed the airport people an appraisal that it was 150 years old and should not be in baggage. They decided he wasn't going to do anything with the strings. One particular bus company in the UK allows you to either buy a variety of tickets or use their card, which you topped up online and just scanned when you got on and off the bus. One day on my way home, my card had gone below funds without me realizing. So when I put it on the scanner to get on, it went red, which means you have less than 0p on your card. The driver just said, "Doesn't matter, you get on all the time. Have a free trip." Nicest chap ever. Back in the 70s, when people still bought marijuana an ounce at a time, people would occasionally go halves on a lid. That's an ounce of pot, to you whippersnappers. But how to divvy it up fairly without a scale? Easy. One person would divide the pot in half as best he could. The other person would choose which half he wanted. Siblings all over the world has lived by the principle of you divide, I choose for years. I was departing from Lima, Peru to fly back to the US. Before boarding the plane, I bought 2 bottles of water from the drink counter directly beside the gate to board. They sell water past security. Surely this water is safe, right? When I was about to get on, I was not allowed to bring my 2 bottles of water on because they might be explosives. This is what the lady tearing the tickets told me. But wait, there's more. The woman tearing the tickets sold me the bottles of water. Called into tech support for a software product. Got the level I support primate, who asked me to describe the issue. It fails like this with this error message. I said, and since I know you have to ask, I've already run for stop for start, fetched and pushed the rules at least twice, disabled the ruler set, pushed an empty ruler set, run the fetch key command, and rebooted the box. There was a short pause, where I expected he'd either try to get me to do it all again, not, I would add here, an unreasonable request, or else bump me up a level. Nope. Well, you've done everything on my list, he said, and I can tell you know what you're doing, so we'll skip the pain of level 2 and just go ahead and page the senior engineer on call. Not 5 minutes later I was speaking to a software guy, and we had a fix by the next morning. I got a knife through airport security in NYC, got in the plane, put my hand in my pocket, found it, and felt like a god. I'm a just god, for we all lived. If you were going to blow yourself up, then I am sure you have already stopped reading this due to the fact that about 500 replies have started with this. They used to make us do this before entering football games at my university. Little did they know, I've been drinking vodka like a champ my entire life, and it's pretty easy to take a few pulls of vodka right in front of them without making a face. The hardest part was not passing out from all the vodka. That's pretty unintelligent. Security at music events here usually just open the bottle and take a whiff. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.